Hi students, and welcome to this week's video lesson. This week's lesson is different than our previous lessons because today you'll be learning a bit about music theory. So you actually don't need your instrument to participate along with this video. You simply need to listen and follow along. Your assignment this week will also be a bit different. Rather than submit a video, you're going to complete a worksheet on Google Classroom. And the worksheet is simply a Google form that you will complete and submit right online. You don't need to print the worksheet. It should be really easy. So when you're finished listening to this video, go back to Google Classroom and complete the worksheet. Now you can still practice your instrument this week, even though you're not submitting a video. And for your practice, I suggest you review some of the material we've already learned. For example, you can review the scale, twinkle variation. You can go on and look in the book on pages 12, 13, perhaps even page 14. And for those of you that may have skipped one of the assignments earlier on, it might be a good week to go back and catch up on that. And then also, if you're going to be participating in Virtual Strings Karate, you might want to start working on those songs. So there's plenty of things that you can be working on and practicing. You just simply won't need to submit a video for your assignment this week. Okay? Well, let's get started. So today's lesson is going to be an introduction to the music staff. We'll start off with a very simple definition of the staff. And this is the definition that I have told you before when we were in school, and I also mentioned it in our video of Song for Christine. So you may remember the staff is the 5 lines and the 4 spaces where music notes are written. And here I have a picture of the staff. And I've labeled the lines with some arrows. So the lines are pretty self-explanatory. Literally, they're thick black lines like this. We call those lines. The spaces are actually the area in between the lines. We refer to these as spaces. So we have the lines and the spaces. And the way the staff works is each line and space represents a different note name. And musicians read music by memorizing what note name each line and space stands for. Okay, now let's identify the lines and the spaces of the staff. It's important to be able to differentiate between the different notes on the different lines and spaces. So it's important to be able to identify the note's location. The lines and the spaces are numbered from bottom to top. So here's that picture of the staff again. Now this time I numbered each line. So you see the numbering is from the bottom to the top. So this first line here, this one is number 1, the one on the bottom. And then you number up from there. So this is line 2, 3, 4, 5. And the same thing goes for the spaces. This bottom space here, we refer to this as space 1, space 2, space 3, and space 4. Now, some kids have a difficult time remembering which direction to number the lines and spaces. Sometimes they can't remember, is it the top one that's line 1 or is it the bottom one that's line 1? And so here's the trick to remember. You can think of the staff like a building with several floors. Now, when you number the floors of a building, you always start with the bottom floor as level 1, and then you number up from there. You would never label the top floor of a building as level 1 and then number down from there. That wouldn't make sense. So you could imagine that the staff is a nice tall building. Maybe even below the staff, you can imagine a parking garage or a basement. And then above the building, you can imagine that this is like the rooftop, and that you number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up from there. Okay, now there are 2 types of notes on the staff: line notes and space notes. Let's learn about them. The line notes sit on the staff lines. So now here's the very same picture of the staff, only this time I drew some notes on there. So you can see line notes, the staff line actually crosses through the note head, right through the middle. And you can see for each one of these notes, the line crosses right straight through. Now, this might sound kind of silly, but I have this special way to remember which ones are the line notes. So, have you ever heard of a kebab? A kebab is like pretty much food on a stick. So, sometimes I imagine that the staff lines are all a bunch of sticks and that the notes are like the food. And the sticks, or the skewer you could call it, goes straight through the food. So for instance, if you had a kebab with fruits on it, you could imagine like the notes like a nice chunk of juicy pineapple. Oh boy, now I'm getting hungry. And then the staff line's like a stick, and it goes right through the middle of the pineapple. I told you it was silly, but do you see what I mean? Now, even though these are all line notes, each one is different, and the way you identify them is by the line number that they sit on. So for example, this very first note here sits on line 1. So you would call the location of this note line 1. And since this note sits on line 2, we would call the location of this note line 2. I will bet you know what we will call this one then. Line 3, then line 4, and line 5. And again, this is how you identify the location of the line notes. Let's move on to space notes now. Now, space notes, they sit in between the staff lines like this. So, since we're on the theme of food, let's keep imagining that the staff lines are like sticks. And the notes are in between the sticks. Well, what kind of food do you pick up and eat with sticks? Sushi, of course. So I like to call the space notes the sushi notes. And I like to call the line notes the kebab notes. I know, it's a bit silly, but does it help you see the difference a little? Anyways, we also identify the location of the space notes by the space number that they sit on. So this very first note here, we would call this location space 1. We would call this one space 2. This one space 3. And this one space 4. Okay, now let's pause and check for understanding. I'm going to give you some notes in a random order, and I want you to identify the location of the note on the staff. And you're going to do this by answering 2 simple questions. First, you're going to say whether it's a line or a space note. Then you're going to say what line or space number the note sits on. Let's try one. Okay, so here's your first example. First, can you tell me whether this note is a line note or a space note? Remember, the line note looks like a kebab, and the space note looks like a sushi. Did you say a line note? Sure thing. This is a line note. You see how the line crosses right through the middle of the note? And it looks a bit like a kebab. Very good. Now you need to identify what line number it's on. And do you remember which direction to count the staff? Remember, you count from bottom to top. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. If you said this note was line 4, you're correct. Let's do another one. Okay, students. Is it a line note, a kebab, or a space note, a sushi? If you said it was a space note or a sushi note, you're correct. Now, what number space is this note on? Remember, you count bottom to top, so this is the bottom space. This is space 1. Okay, let's see if you can do the next one, and I won't give you any hints. Did you say space 3? Nice work. Let's do another one. Is this one on the line or in the space? On the line, and what line number? Counting from the bottom to the top, this is line 5. Great work. Last one. Okay, students, line or space, and what number? Line 1. Did you get it? Nice job. Just to give you a preview of our next music theory lesson, it's going to be all about the clef signs. And I wanted to give you a preview of clef signs and how it relates with today's lesson. So what you need to know is the clef sign is the symbol at the beginning of the staff that assigns letter names to the lines and spaces on the staff. So let me show you an example. Here's that same note from the last slide. This is the line 1 note. Well, some of you, particularly if you have some experience reading music or playing piano, some of you may be thinking to yourself, oh, Miss Cavallero, why can't I just call this note E? I already know that line 1 is E. Can I just call this note E? And the answer is no, because you actually don't know for sure if this note is E unless you have a treble clef at the beginning of the line. So violin students read from treble clef. We call this a treble clef, and also the right hand of the piano. So when this clef sign is here, all the lines and spaces are then assigned letter names, and this one is in fact E. However, if the treble clef is not there, we can't say for sure that this note is an E. And let me tell you what I mean. So here's a different clef. Again, piano players may recognize it. It's called the bass clef. Cello and bass students read off the bass clef, and also it's the left hand of the piano. Now, if you have a bass clef in the front of the staff, then the note names are all different. This is not an E. If you're reading bass clef, it's actually a G. And let me show you a less common clef, but a very special clef. This one's called alto clef. And viola students, you read off of the alto clef. And when the alto clef is at the beginning of the staff here, line 1 note is actually an F. So hopefully that helps to explain why when there's no clef at the beginning of the staff, you really can't identify the note name of this note because the clef tells you what letter to play. So that's why when there is no clef sign on the staff, you would simply call this note line 1. Well, students, that concludes our lesson for this week. Remember, for your assignment, you do not need to record yourself playing a video. You simply need to go to Google Classroom and complete the Google Form worksheet. Keep up your practice, students. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.